For 37 years, the galaxy had been screaming, and no one had been listening. Entire star systems vanished overnight. Ancient civilizations were erased so completely that not even debris remained. Species older than Earth itself were reduced to nothing more than forgotten names in shattered databases. And now, the war was almost over. Not because peace had been achieved, but because there was no one left strong enough to fight. The Galactic Coalition, once the greatest alliance ever formed, was collapsing. Their fleets were broken, their leaders exhausted, their people waiting for extinction. That was when someone made a desperate suggestion. Ask the humans. The room fell silent. Humans, primitive, divided, violent creatures barely capable of leaving their own solar system. No one expected them to save the galaxy. But no one understood one simple truth. When everything else fails, humanity fights best when there is nothing left to lose. The edge of defeat. Admiral Zorith stood motionless on the command deck of the Eternal Radiance, staring into a holographic map of the galaxy. Blue lights, coalition systems, were vanishing one by one. Each fading signal meant a conquered world. Each silence meant billions dead. Outer rim defenses have collapsed, his tactical officer reported, her voice hollow. Enemy forces will reach our core territories within 6 cycles. Zorith closed all 4 of his eyes. He had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries. He had seen victories, retreats, sacrifices. But never this. Never hopelessness. The Vraxian Dominion was unstoppable. They were towering, heavily armored beings, over 3 meters tall, with natural plating that could deflect most energy weapons. Their claws could tear through starship hulls like soft metal. Worse than their strength was their adaptability. Every tactic used against them became useless within weeks. Shield frequencies, weapon variations, fleet formations. The Vraxians learned faster than anyone the galaxy had ever faced. And they showed no mercy. Worlds were stripped of resources. Populations were consumed or exterminated. Culture, history, memory, erased. We have exhausted every option, Zorith muttered. Not every option, said a calm voice behind him. Counselor Yaze stepped forward, her aged blue-gray skin marked with ceremonial lines of diplomacy and mourning. There is one species we have not approached. Zorith already knew the answer, and hated it. The humans, she said. A desperate idea. Zorith turned slowly, all 4 eyes narrowing. Humans are barely spacefaring, he said. Their fastest vessels take months to cross their own system. Their weapons are crude. Their societies fractured. What could they possibly contribute? Yaze did not argue. I have studied their history, she replied quietly. They are violent, inconsistent, emotion-driven. That does not inspire confidence. It should, Yaze said. They have fought wars among themselves for their entire existence. Civil wars, world wars, wars fought with sticks, then steel, then fire from the sky. Zorith scoffed. Savages killing savages. Survivors, Yaze corrected. They adapt. They innovate. And when cornered, they become terrifying. Silence stretched across the bridge. Another blue system blinked out. Gone. Millions dead. Zorith stared at the map, then straightened. We are out of time, Yaze said softly. If the humans refuse, we die anyway. If they accept, we gain something unpredictable. Zorith exhaled slowly. Make contact, he said. Offer them anything they demand. First contact. 3 days later, a coalition diplomatic vessel entered Earth's orbit. Human sensors detected it instantly. Satellites panicked. Militaries scrambled. Fighters launched. Missile systems locked targets. But the humans did not fire. Instead, they transmitted a message. Identify yourself. State your intentions. Counselor Yaze watched the response feeds with fascination. No screaming. No mass hysteria. No immediate attack. Just curiosity and readiness. The meeting took place in New York City, inside the United Nations complex. Human leaders from every nation filled the chamber. Yaze stood before them and told the truth. She showed footage of burning worlds, devoured cities, fleets torn apart like toys. She spoke of billions dead and billions more waiting to die. When she finished, the room was silent. Not fearful, not despairing. Something else. A human woman finally stood. Grace Keller, Secretary General of the United Nations. So let me understand this, she said calmly. You possess faster-than-light travel, planet-cracking weapons, shields beyond anything we can imagine. Yes. And you're still losing. Hayes nodded. Grace turned to the man beside her, a scarred, broad-shouldered military commander. General Morrison, she said. Your assessment. Jack Morrison had been studying the battle footage without blinking. I think, he said slowly, your enemy has never fought humans before. And that's about to be their biggest mistake. The human answer. Jack stood, addressing the alien delegates directly. You fight the same way every time, he said. You line up. You charge. You rely on strength and honor. That is war, Zorith replied. Jack smiled. No, he said. That's tradition. The smile faded. Humans don't fight fair. We fight to win. The room went still. We ambush, sabotage, deceive. We destroy supply lines, break morale, make the enemy afraid to sleep. Zorith felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Confidence. Predatory certainty. Jack continued. Give us 1 year. Access to your technology. Freedom to fight our way. And in return? Grace asked. Jack didn't hesitate. We'll turn your losing war into their extinction event. Zorith studied the human commander. And for the first time in decades, he felt hope. 1 year. That was all humanity had asked for. To Admiral Zorith, the demand was absurd. A single year could not possibly reshape a war that had devoured the galaxy for nearly 4 decades. Entire species had vanished in that time. Fleets larger than anything humans could imagine had been annihilated. And yet, the humans had not sounded uncertain. They had sounded eager. The bargain that changed everything. The alliance was signed within hours. Coalition engineers transferred access codes to faster-than-light drives, energy shielding matrices, particle weapons, and fabrication systems. Human scientists received more data in a single day than their species had accumulated in its entire history. And then something unexpected happened. The humans did not immediately start building battleships. They started asking questions. Thousands of them. Questions not about weapons power or ship tonnage, but about the enemy. How do the Vraxians sleep? What do they eat? How do they communicate between fleets? What frightens them? What do they value? Coalition officers were confused and uneasy. For generations, war had been simple. Build stronger fleets, meet the enemy head-on, overwhelm them with firepower. Humans, apparently, did not see war that way. The analysts. Commander Daniel Hayes led the first human strategic team. He was older than most officers, early 50s, with calm eyes that missed nothing and a voice that rarely rose. 30 years in intelligence had taught him a simple truth. Wars were not won by weapons alone. They were won by understanding. Hayes and his team, xenobiologist Dr. Lisa Park and Marine Captain Samuel Grant, set up operations aboard the Eternal Radiance itself. Admiral Zorith watched as they reviewed battle after battle. Play Meridian 4, Hayes said one morning. The hologram flickered to life. Coalition fleets outnumbered the Vraxians 3-1. Better positioning. Stronger shields. Total annihilation in under 2 hours. Zorith clenched his fists. Everything was done correctly. Hayes nodded. I agree. Then he asked the question that made several alien officers bristle. Why did you attack straight on? Zorith blinked all 4 eyes. Because that is how war is fought. Is that how the Vraxians fight? Hayes asked. Yes. Hayes exchanged a look with Captain Grant. That's the problem, Grant said. A different kind of war. Hayes pulled up new imagery, old, grainy footage from Earth's past. Soldiers hidden in jungles. Small groups ambushing larger armies. Cities collapsing without a single pitched battle. This, Hayes said, is how humans fight when we are weaker. Zorith stared in confusion. You hide. We survive, Grant replied. We strike supply lines. Sabotage infrastructure. Spread fear and misinformation. We exhaust the enemy before they ever realize they're losing. A Morvani commander hissed in disgust. That is dishonorable. Dr. Park turned to him calmly. Did the Vraxians show honor when they devoured your colonies? The Morvani had no answer, teaching the galaxy to fight dirty. Over the following months, Coalition officers were introduced to concepts that disturbed them deeply. Feints, false retreats, decoy fleets, psychological warfare. Destroy their fuel depots, Grant explained to a packed briefing hall. Their ships become useless. Corrupt their communications, Hayes added. They start killing each other with bad information. Fear is a weapon, Dr. Park said. Use it. Admiral Zorith listened in stunned silence. To him, this felt less like warfare and more like manipulation. Cruel, efficient, human. The ships humans built. When humanity finally began constructing warships, the Coalition expected massive dreadnoughts. Instead, they got something else entirely. Small, fast, aggressive. Human engineers designed vessels meant to strike and vanish. Striker-class ships, they called them. Each carried weapons powerful enough to cripple ships 10 times their size. Each relied on speed, stealth, and surprise, not brute force. 12 ships were completed 4 months ahead of schedule. Volunteers crewed them all. Their commander was Captain Maria Santos, a former fighter pilot whose eyes held the calm of someone who had stared death in the face too many times to fear it. We are not here to fight fair, she told her crews. We are here to hurt the enemy and come home alive. Doubt among the stars. Admiral Zorith stood in the launch bay as the human ships prepared for departure. 12 vessels, he said carefully, against a heavily defended Vraxian supply depot. Maria smiled, a predator's smile. Admiral, she replied, humans fight best when we're outnumbered. Zorith watched the ships launch, their engines burning bright against the void. For the first time since the war began, he felt something dangerously close to optimism. Beside him, Counselor Yates spoke softly. Do you trust them? Zorith didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, I would rather have them as allies than enemies. Far beyond Coalition space, 12 small human ships were racing toward an empire that had never known fear. That was about to change. The Vraxian Dominion had ruled the stars for more than a century. They had crushed over 100 species, broken fleets that dwarfed their own, and erased civilizations that had existed for millennia. Fear followed their banners wherever they traveled. Entire systems surrendered without firing a shot. They had never faced anything like humanity, and they had no idea the war had already changed into the impossible. Captain Maria Santos guided her squadron toward the Chorus system using a hyperspace route Coalition navigators labeled non-viable. 2 massive gas giants distorted space-time so violently that any conventional jump would tear a ship apart. Maria took them through anyway. Human navigation algorithms, improvised, adaptive, and borderline reckless, threaded the squadron through gravitational chaos. Warning alarms screamed across every bridge. Hulls groaned. Shields flared. Then silence. 12 ships dropped out of hyperspace behind Koritha's largest moon, hidden from enemy sensors by its massive gravity shadow. Maria exhaled slowly. We're in, she said. The squadron powered down to minimal emissions, drifting like debris in the dark. Ahead of them hung the target, the beating heart of an empire. The Vraxian supply depot was enormous, a station the size of a city, bristling with docks and storage bays. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, everything the Dominion needed to keep its war machine alive. 30 Vraxian warships patrolled lazily around it. They were bored. No one attacked Vraxian supply depots. Coalition fleets were too predictable, too honorable, too afraid. Maria watched the patrol pattern scroll across her display. They're expecting a fleet, she murmured. They're not watching the shadows. She switched to tight beam comms. Radio silence remains absolute. We drift for 6 hours. On my mark, we strike fast and hard. A young tactical officer hesitated. Captain, there are 30 of them. Maria smiled faintly. I can count. Can they? The moment of violence. At precisely 0300 ship time, Maria gave the signal. 12 human vessels ignited their engines at full burn. They exploded from behind the moon like predators unleashed. The Vraxians had seconds to react. Alarms wailed. Shields surged. Weapons powered up. Too late. The humans weren't targeting the warships. They went straight for the depot. Precision fire tore into exposed infrastructure. Not the armored hull, but the weak points Coalition engineers had never thought to exploit. Fuel reservoirs detonated first, then ammunition caches, then power cores. The station began tearing itself apart from the inside. Emergency jump. Maria ordered. Now, Vraxian warships finally opened fire into empty space. The human squadron vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a spreading cloud of fire, debris, and panic. Shockwaves across the war. Damage report, Maria said as her ship emerged in safe space. Minimal shield impact, her officer replied. No casualties. Behind them, the Korath supply depot, years of construction, lifetimes of logistics, was gone. 30 Vraxian warships drifted helplessly, suddenly starving in hostile territory. For the first time in recorded history, the Vraxian Dominion had suffered a blow it did not understand. The fear begins. Word spread fast. Human strikes appeared without warning across Dominion space. Supply convoys vanished. Mining facilities burned. Communication relays went dark. The humans never stayed to fight. They hit, disappeared, and struck somewhere else before the Vraxians could respond. Then came the messages. Human operatives hacked Vraxian networks and broadcast footage of destroyed ships, burning stations, and screaming alarms. A single phrase repeated again and again. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We are coming. Fear, true fear, entered Vraxian ranks. Commanders hesitated. Patrols doubled. Sleep became difficult. The enemy that once charged headlong into battle now flinched at shadows. The Coalition watches. Admiral Zorith stood in a strategy chamber as Commander Daniel Hayes outlined the latest operation. You deliberately lost a skirmish? Zorith asked, baffled. 3 unmanned decoys, Hayes replied calmly. No crew. No losses. The Vraxians chased them for 6 hours, Captain Grant added, which gave Captain Santos time to destroy their primary repair facility. Zorith struggled to process it. You sacrifice ships on purpose? Ships are tools, Hayes said. People are not. Zorith felt something shift inside him. Coalition doctrine had always prized visible strength and honorable confrontation. Humans valued results. Prey no more. You fight like prey animals, Zorith said finally. Hiding. Striking from darkness. Hayes smiled slightly. Admiral, he said, humans spent millions of years as prey. We survived by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than what hunted us. He gestured to the tactical display, Dominion territory flickering with damage reports. We learned how to turn fear into a weapon. And once we become the hunters, we don't stop. The war's momentum shifted. Not with a single decisive battle, but with 1,000 invisible cuts. The Vraxians were bleeding, and they didn't know how to stop it. The Vraxian Dominion had never retreated before. In every war they had fought, momentum belonged to them. Once their fleets advanced, they did not stop. Once fear took hold of an enemy, surrender followed quickly. That pattern had defined the galaxy for 100 years. Until humanity broke it. The Vraxian decision. Reports flooded the Vraxian High Command. Supply depots destroyed. Convoys vanishing. Entire sectors running low on fuel and ammunition. Worst of all, morale was collapsing. Vraxian commanders delayed offensives. Patrols were doubled. Fleets hesitated before entering systems that had once been considered safe. Fear was spreading. The High Command decided it was time to remind the galaxy who ruled the stars. Humanity would be made an example. Target, New Providence. 300 Vraxian warships gathered at the edge of human-controlled space. Their target was New Providence, a young human colony world of green continents and blue oceans, home to 2 million civilians. It had minimal defenses, no major fleet presence. Destroying it would send a message no species could ignore. Humans would learn fear. 12 hours. Commander Grace Patterson received the alert with exactly 12 hours to spare. She stood on the bridge of the Guardian, staring at the tactical projection as red enemy icons filled the display. Evacuation is impossible, her operations officer, Kevin Ross, said quietly. We don't have the transports. Grace didn't answer right away. She was 35 years old, too young for the responsibility resting on her shoulders, too experienced to pretend there was a miracle waiting. 27 ships against 300. By every rational calculation, New Providence was already lost. Grace thought of Earth, of her mother, of the brother who still believed war was something distant and heroic. Then she thought of the colony below her. Children, families, people who had trusted the fleet to protect them. She straightened. We're not evacuating, she said. Kevin turned toward her, eyes wide. Commander, that's suicide. Maybe, Grace replied calmly. But running guarantees their deaths. She activated fleet-wide communications. The speech that changed everything. Grace's face appeared on screens across the small defense force. I won't lie to you, she began. We are outnumbered. Most of us will not survive today. No one disconnected. But I want you to remember who we are, she continued. Humanity survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that wiped out millions. We faced extinction more than once and refused to disappear. She paused. The Vraxians believe fear will make us kneel. They believe we will run like every species before us. Her voice hardened. They are wrong. A murmur of acknowledgments rippled through the channel. We will fight, Grace said. We will make them pay for every inch of space. And when the galaxy hears this story, they will know that New Providence did not surrender. She inhaled slowly. Who's with me? Every ship responded, setting the trap. Grace positioned her forces carefully. Some ships hid within asteroid fields. Others lurked behind the colony's moon. Mines were seeded along approach vectors. Decoy signals flooded enemy sensors. The Vraxian armada arrived like a storm, confident, aggressive, unstoppable. Straight into the trap. The first wave struck the minefield. 18 Vraxian ships vanished in seconds. Human vessels surged from cover, hit hard, and disappeared again. False retreats lured pursuers into kill zones. Decoy ships absorbed fire, while real targets repositioned. The battle became chaos. Grace adjusted tactics in real time, voice steady even as alarms screamed around her. The cost of standing. Human ships began to fall, one by one, but they took Vraxians with them. Orbital defense platforms joined the fight. Ground-based missile systems punched holes through enemy formations. Kevin Ross's ship was destroyed, covering a civilian transport corridor. His last transmission was a single word: forward. Grace closed her eyes for half a second, then kept fighting. 6 hours in, 15 human ships were gone. The Vraxians had lost over 80. The armada that expected an easy massacre was now bleeding. One torpedo. A weak signal cut through the chaos. This is Captain Amy Lewis of Irresolute, came a strained voice. Engines gone. Weapons offline. One torpedo remaining. Grace studied the display. The Resolute drifted helplessly toward a massive Vraxian battleship. Amy, Grace said softly, eject. That's an order. A pause. Negative, Commander, Amy replied. I'm ending this. The Resolute accelerated on emergency thrust and slammed into the battleship. The explosion destroyed both vessels and crippled 2 more nearby. Grace felt her chest tighten. But she did not retreat. The hunters arrive. 8 hours into the battle, hyperspace ruptured. Coalition reinforcements arrived, led by Admiral Zorath himself. Behind them came fast-moving human strike squadrons. Captain Maria Santos cut off the Vraxian escape routes. The hunters had arrived. The Vraxians tried to flee. Most did not succeed. When the battle ended, only 47 Vraxian ships escaped. 253 had been destroyed. New Providence still stood. Aftermath. Grace Patterson was found unconscious on her bridge, bloodied, her hand locked around the weapons console. Medics had to pry her fingers loose. She woke 3 days later aboard Admiral Zoratha's flagship. "You should have lost," Zorath said quietly. Grace tried to smile. Didn't feel like an option. "The Vraxians have requested negotiations," Zorath added. Grace's eyes hardened. "Tell them," she whispered, "we're not finished." Zorath stared at her in awe. Humanity had just proven something the galaxy would never forget. They didn't just fight when they could win. They fought when they refused to run. The Battle of New Providence did not end the war. But it shattered something far more important than ships and fleets. It shattered the myth of Vraxian inevitability. Aftershocks across the stars. News of the battle spread faster than any weapon. A human colony, outnumbered more than 10 to 1, had held the line for 8 brutal hours. Not through superior firepower, but through stubborn resistance, deception, and sheer refusal to surrender. Coalition worlds listened in disbelief. Species that had prepared for extinction began to hesitate. Maybe the war wasn't over. Admiral Zorath felt it immediately. For the first time in 37 years, incoming transmissions carried something other than despair. They carried questions. How did they do it? Can we learn this? Can we fight like humans? The spread of human doctrine. Human officers were requested everywhere, not just as commanders, but as teachers. Coalition military academies rewrote entire curricula in weeks. Honorable formations were replaced with layered ambush strategies. Static defenses gave way to mobile traps. Supply chain warfare became standard doctrine. Human terms entered alien languages. Decoy, feint, kill zone, psychological pressure. Admiral Zorath watched veteran commanders, once rigid and traditional, learn to lie to their enemies with straight faces. It unsettled him, but it worked. Vraxian advances slowed, then stalled. Then something unprecedented happened. They began losing territory. Maria Santos refuses to step back. Rear Admiral Maria Santos earned her promotion after her 20th successful deep strike operation. She accepted it with a nod and stayed at the front. "I'm not done flying," she told command. The Vraxians, she warned, were adapting. They're guarding supply lines better, posting scouts, learning our patterns. "What do you recommend?" Zorath asked. Maria smiled coldly. "We change patterns." She tapped the tactical display. "Humans don't rely on one method. If something stops working, we invent something worse." Zorath felt a chill. The enemy strikes back. The Vraxian Dominion, cornered and enraged, launched counteroffensives across multiple sectors. For the first time, they attempted deception. Fake convoys, false signals, trap formations. They learned fast. Human losses increased. Coalition morale wavered. The war was evolving again. Commander Daniel Hayes addressed the Combined Command Council. "They're copying us," a Sylphine general hissed. "They're becoming like humans." Hayes shook his head. "No," he said. "They're imitating tactics without understanding the mindset." He leaned forward. "Humans don't adapt by copying. We adapt by anticipating." Breaking the enemy's will. The next phase of the war was quieter and more devastating. Human operatives targeted cultural symbols. Vraxian victory monuments were destroyed. Command centers were humiliated through public breaches. Messages spread across their networks, not threats, but reminders. Your leaders cannot protect you. Your fleets are bleeding. This war is no longer certain. Desertions increased. Internal conflicts erupted among Vraxian command ranks. The Dominion, once unified by conquest, began to fracture. The turning point. 6 months after New Providence, coalition forces launched coordinated offensives across 3 major fronts. Human strike groups opened corridors through defensive lines. Coalition fleets followed. Worlds long lost were reclaimed. Refugees returned to ruined planets, carrying something rare. Hope. Admiral Zorith stood before a star map that now showed more blue than red. "This is impossible," he murmured. Daniel Hayes stood beside him. "No," he replied. "This is what happens when fear changes sides." A dangerous question. Despite the victories, a troubling debate spread through the coalition. If humans could dismantle the Vraxians so effectively, what would happen when the war ended? Some feared humanity almost as much as the enemy. Zorith confronted Hayes directly. "When this is over," the Admiral asked, "what will humans do with this power?" Hayes considered the question. "We'll argue," he said. "We'll disagree. We'll make mistakes." Then he met Zorith's gaze. "But we won't forget who stood with us when everything was lost." Zorith nodded slowly. The galaxy had placed its faith in humanity. There was no going back. The end game begins. Intelligence confirmed the unthinkable. The Vraxians were pulling forces back toward their home system. "They're consolidating," Maria Santos reported, "preparing for a final stand." Daniel Hayes didn't smile. "Good," he said. "That means we know where they'll be." The coalition began assembling the largest fleet in history. Not to defend, to end the war. Zorith watched thousands of ships gather and realized something profound. This was no longer a coalition war. This was a human-led war. And the galaxy was ready to follow them anywhere. For the first time in over a century, the Vraxian Dominion was on the defensive. Their fleets were no longer spreading outward like an unstoppable tide. They were pulling back, system by system, line by line, toward a single point. Home. Vraxis Prime. To the Vraxians, it was more than a planet. It was proof of destiny. A world fortified beyond reason, surrounded by layered defense grids, autonomous weapon platforms, and the largest standing fleet the galaxy had ever recorded. No enemy had ever reached it. That was about to change. The largest armada ever assembled. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Constellation, humanity's first purpose-built capital ship. Around him, space was crowded with power. 3,000 vessels filled the void. Kalani cruisers shimmered with adaptive shields. Morvani destroyers moved in perfect formation, coordinated through telepathic networks. Sylphine ships phased in and out of visibility like ghosts. And scattered among them, human ships. Smaller, faster, deadlier. Predators hidden among giants. Dr. Lisa Park stood beside Hayes, studying the tactical display. "This is every fleet we have," she said quietly. "If this fails," Hayes nodded, "there won't be another chance." "But you still think it's enough?" Hayes didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "It's not the ships that matter. It's what's inside them." He gestured to the display. A year ago, these species were ready to surrender. Now they believe they can win because they watched humans do the impossible. A new kind of leadership. Human officers were everywhere, not issuing commands, but integrating. Admiral Zorith watched the bridge activity with a mixture of awe and unease. Human commanders spoke calmly under pressure. They encouraged debate. They allowed junior officers to challenge assumptions in real time. Coalition hierarchy had always been rigid. Human command felt alive, messy, effective. This would have been unthinkable before, Zorith admitted to Hayes. Giving so much autonomy. Hayes smiled faintly. Rigid systems break under stress. Flexible ones bend and survive. Zorith considered that. Perhaps that was humanity's true strength. The first blow. Human strike groups led the assault. They didn't attack the main defenses. They attacked around them. Outer sensor arrays vanished. Communication relays went silent. Automated defense platforms began firing at phantom targets. False signals planted weeks earlier. Vraxian commanders shouted orders into broken networks. Confusion spread. Coalition fleets followed through the gaps humans had carved. For the first time, the Vraxians weren't dictating the pace. They were reacting. Maria Santos over Vraxis Prime. Rear Admiral Maria Santos commanded the spearhead. Her ships punched through the inner defense ring with brutal efficiency. She watched the enemy home world grow large beneath her canopy. Vast cities, industrial complexes, military zones built over generations of conquest. All enemy military vessels in high orbit neutralized, her tactical officer reported. Remaining forces are surrendering or fleeing. Maria leaned back slowly. The war could end here. One order. Human weapons could burn the planet clean. End the Vraxian threat forever. The silence on her bridge was heavy. The choice no one expected. Awaiting orders, Admiral, the officer said carefully. Maria closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of New Providence, of Grace Patterson standing against impossible odds, of civilians who had trusted the fleet to protect them, of what it meant to fight, not out of hatred, but out of refusal to surrender. No planetary bombardment, Maria said. Several officers stiffened. We secure orbit. Disable remaining weapons. Prepare for occupation. Her executive officer hesitated. Admiral, after everything they've done. We are not here to commit genocide, Maria said firmly. We're here to end a war. She stared at the planet below. They conquered because they believed survival required domination. We're going to prove them wrong. The end of the Dominion. Formal surrender came 7 days later aboard the Constellation. Vraxian representatives stood stiff and silent as Admiral Hayes laid out the terms. Their military would be dismantled. Conquered worlds would be freed. The Vraxian people would survive under coalition supervision. Admiral Zoreth watched the ceremony in disbelief. You fight without honor, he said quietly to Dr. Park afterward. You deceive, ambush, and terrify your enemies. Yes, Lisa replied. And yet you show mercy when victory is absolute. She smiled gently. That's humanity. Contradictory, dangerous, and capable of learning from its worst impulses. Zoreth nodded slowly. When we first contacted Earth, I thought we were recruiting soldiers, he said. I was wrong. What did you find? Lisa asked. Zoreth looked around at former enemies, now standing together. Hope, he said. The war is over, but the work begins. As fleets stood down and weapons powered off, Hayes felt no triumph. Only responsibility. Winning the war had been the easy part. Building something better would be harder. And yet, for the first time in his career, he believed it was possible. Humanity hadn't just defeated an empire. They had shown the galaxy a different future. One earned not through domination, but through resilience, adaptability, and choice. The stars were quiet at last. But the story wasn't finished yet. 10 years after the war ended, the galaxy no longer looked the same. Trade lanes that had once carried invasion fleets now carried civilian transports, research vessels, and relief convoys. Worlds that had been silent for generations pulsed with life again. Species once reduced to refugees stood rebuilding their cultures, their cities, and their futures. The Vraxian Dominion was gone, but something far greater had replaced it. A new center of the galaxy. Unity Station hovered at the crossroads of known space, a massive construct of alloy, crystal, and borrowed technologies from 100 species. It was not a capital in the traditional sense. No empire ruled from it. Instead, it served as a meeting ground, a place where disputes were argued instead of fought, where power was balanced instead of imposed. At its center stood a monument, carved from asteroid stone and earth marble. It depicted figures from many species standing side by side, facing the stars together. At its base, a simple inscription read, "They were fearless, so we learned courage. They were relentless, so we learned to endure. They were human, and they taught us how to survive." Grace Patterson returns. Ambassador Grace Patterson visited the monument every year. Her hair had turned gray, and the scars from New Providence still ached in cold vacuum environments, but her posture remained unbroken. She stood quietly this year, hands clasped behind her back, remembering the voices she could still hear if she let herself. Kevin Ross, Amy Lewis, so many others. They had not lived to see this future. But they had made it possible. A hesitant voice interrupted her thoughts. Ambassador Patterson? Grace turned to see a young Vraxian standing a respectful distance away. This one had been born after the war. No armored plating etched for conquest. No ritual scars of dominance. Just cautious eyes and an uncertain posture. Yes. Grace replied gently. I wanted to thank you, the Vraxian said. My instructors taught us about New Providence, about how your people could have destroyed us, but chose not to. Grace studied the young being. And what did you learn from that? She asked. The Vraxian lowered their head slightly, a gesture of humility learned from human diplomats. That strength does not require cruelty, they said. And that survival does not require domination. Grace smiled softly. We learned that lesson the hard way, she said. Across centuries of war, mistakes, and regret. She looked back up at the monument. We decided it was time to stop repeating those mistakes. The old Admiral's reflection. Admiral Zoreth, long retired, watched the ceremony from a viewing platform. His skin had faded with age. His movements were slower now, but his eyes, still sharp, tracked everything. Dr. Lisa Park stood beside him, now Director of Interstellar Sciences. You seem troubled, she said. I am humbled, Zoreth replied. When we first approached Earth, I believed humanity was reckless, dangerous, unfit for galactic responsibility. Lisa smiled knowingly. And now, Zoreth folded his hands. Now I believe they were exactly what the galaxy needed. He gestured toward Unity Station. They taught us that honor without survival is meaningless, and survival without mercy is empty. He paused. You did not simply save us from extinction. Lisa looked at him. You saved us from ourselves, Zoreth finished. The human reputation. Humanity never became rulers of the galaxy. That fact confused many early observers. They had the fleets, the technology, the respect and fear. But humans declined absolute power. Instead, they embedded themselves everywhere. Human officers trained alien fleets. Human engineers rebuilt shattered worlds. Human diplomats mediated conflicts that once would have become wars. And when asked why they did not take control, the answer was always the same. We already tried that on our own planet. It didn't work. The final lesson. On the anniversary of the Battle of New Providence, Unity Station held a moment of silence. Ships across known space powered down their engines for exactly 8 minutes. One for every hour the colony had held. Grace Patterson stood among ambassadors, soldiers, civilians, and former enemies. She spoke only once. We didn't win because we were stronger, she said. We won because we refused to quit, when quitting would have been easier. She looked across the assembly. The galaxy didn't need conquerors. It needed people stubborn enough to stand when logic said to fall. Her voice softened. That is what it means to be human. The truth that remained. As the lights of Unity Station glowed against the stars, ships from 100 worlds passed peacefully through its lanes. Trade replaced conquest. Cooperation replaced fear. And remembered beneath it all was the simple truth that had changed everything. When the war was lost, when hope was gone, when logic demanded surrender, humanity stood its ground. They did not just win the war. They taught the galaxy how to survive it and still build a future worth living in.